Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about duplicates in your family tree. Now, there are a few terms you're going to hear thrown around today, and so let me just clarify some of those. One of them is going to be pedigree collapse. And let me explain that as best I could. I tried to think of a lot of different ways to explain this, but we'll see if this works. Most of you are aware that you have 2 parents and 4 grandparents and 8 great-grandparents and 16 great-great-grandparents. And as you go back, of course, every generation, the number of ancestors in that previous generation doubles. So I just did some simple math based on a 25-year generation. In 25 generations, you will have gone back about back to about 1400. And if you just keep doing the math, you're going to have about 33 million ancestors. Now, there are a lot of estimates that say there were around 300 million people in the world in 1400. The problem is those people are spread out all over the world. And back in 1400, our ancestors tended to be in very localized areas, specific pockets of Germany or England, or even as they started migrating here to what would become the United States. And so the problem isn't that there weren't that many people in the world in 1400. The problem is that there weren't that many people in the region where your ancestors were from at that time. And so what you're going to discover very quickly as you start doing research, and 1500 is about as early as you're probably going to be able to trace much of your family tree in actual records, then you're going to discover that you've got a lot of duplicates in your tree. You will have descended from the same people, the same couple, sometimes more than one way. Sometimes on your father's side of the family, sometimes on your mother's side of the family. In my case, so far, my parents' trees haven't crossed, but there are duplicates in my father's ancestry and duplicates in my mother's ancestry. And so that's just one of the many reasons why I encourage people to keep a single family tree, because as you're doing this research, you're less likely to duplicate your own work if you discover that you have some of that duplicate descendancy in your tree. So that's one way in which we end up with duplicates in our tree, is the further back we go, the fewer people were in a specific area, and so we descend sometimes from the same couples multiple times. The other way that duplicates end up in your tree is when you have cousins marrying cousins. And so, for example, in my family, and I joke about this a lot, but it happens in a lot of places, my mom's family is from Northwest Arkansas, and before that they lived in Tennessee and then Georgia, and a lot of those areas that they lived in were very remote. And so you end up with a small pool of people to choose from as spouses. And so what we sometimes see is we'll see, one of my mom's sets of cousins on one side of her family and another one of her sets of cousins on another side of her family marrying each other, where you've got like a brother and a sister marrying another brother and sister from another family. And so I end up doing some of that descendancy research, or adding the children of my ancestors, and discovering that they're marrying each other. Like I said, in my mom's family, that happens fairly recently. Like we're talking actually even the 1900s, the 1800s in Arkansas and Georgia and Tennessee. In my dad's side of the family, it's back a little bit further. It gets back into the 16 and 1700s in Massachusetts and New Jersey and Rhode Island, and some of those smaller communities in those areas in New England back a little bit further. And so it's going to happen. You're going to end up with duplicate people showing up in your family tree. And so what we're going to talk about today, I know that was a really long intro, but what we're going to talk about today is, first of all, how to prevent those duplicates in your family tree. And then if you have them or you come across them, how to take care of them. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. And I just have a quick little visual here in case you didn't quite follow all of my hand gestures and words. Here's a quick visual for you. So this is my great-great-grandmother. She was born in 1846 in Tennessee and died in 1910 in Arkansas, and she was a Jones. Of course she was, because, we need it to be as difficult as possible. But if you'll notice here, both of her parents were also Joneses. And there was, of course, some suspicion that they might be related, but as we dug into it further, here's what we discovered. Eliza's grandfather on her paternal side of the family, Robert Jones, and her great-grandfather on her mother's side of the family, James Jones, were actually brothers. And so what that means is that these two gentlemen then are first cousins. And so Daniel Jones married Margaret Jones, who was his first cousin once removed, and then they had Eliza. And that is not as uncommon as you might think it is. So here we have Dan Jones and Harriet Franklin in my family tree twice. However, if you go and look at the index list of who's in my tree, you'll discover that Dan and Harriet are only listed in the index once. And that's because there's only one instance of them in my database, but they are going to show up both places in my family tree because visually, there's not a really easy way, as we're looking at a pedigree chart, and that's what this is, to represent this pedigree collapse, right? It would be really kind of awkward and cause some problems visually if we actually only listed them once and somehow had lines drawn to them from both of these sons, because we're coming from two different sides of Eliza's tree. I hope that makes sense. One of the complaints or questions that we get a lot is, well, I've got these people showing up in my tree twice. Well, yes, they're going to show up on the pedigree view or in the family view twice because you are related to them multiple ways. But the key is to check the index. And there are a couple of ways to do that. If you're using your online tree, you can just go here and type in, I could come in here and I could type in the name Harriet Franklin, and you'll see that it only shows up once, okay? I could also do that by looking at the list of all people, and I could go there to view that as well. In Family Tree Maker, this is my index panel over here. So when I'm in the Family tab, make sure that you've got this index panel over here maximized. And then I can see here, Harriet Franklin is only in my tree once. So she's only listed here in the index once. And so that's an important or an easy way to just kind of see, even if they're showing up twice in your tree or twice in your family view, do you only have them in there once? Now, I think we've covered all this, so let me just make sure I review it. Not everyone in your family tree is going to be a unique individual. Again, that's one of the reasons why I encourage you to have a single family tree for your family, is because you're going to find, as you do this research, that there will be intermarriage, and you don't want to redo your research, and this is an easy way with a single tree to be able to tell that. If you're dealing with remote locations, or if you get further back in time, you're going to find that it occurs more often, and so keep that in mind. And then your options are prevent duplicates in the first place or merge your duplicates. So let's talk about preventing duplicates in the first place. Here's how I do it in Family Tree Maker. The first thing is what I just mentioned, keep the index window open. So when you're working in Family Tree Maker, just keep this little side panel over here open, because what it allows me to do is, as I add people to my tree, I can see immediately whether or not they're showing up over here. Okay, I can kind of glance over here before I add a person and say, you know what, I'm going to add a father for Martha Gardner, and the father that I've discovered, I think his name is William, and so I'm just going to check and see I don't have a William Gardner born in the 1700s listed over here, so I'm not creating a duplicate. So I keep that index window open when I'm in Family Tree Maker. Also, in Family Tree Maker, whenever you add somebody, if the name is the same and the birth date is similar or close to, you will get a little alert. It will pop up and it will say, is this the same person? And so let me just show you, let's see if I can do this without creating a big mess here. Let me just show you what that's going to look like. I'm going to come here and I'm going to add a child for Daniel Jones. And I'm going to do it this way here. Add a child for Daniel Jones, and his name is going to be Robert Jones. And he is going to be born the 25th of September, 1790. And as I come back over here, see if I did that correctly. Okay. And now I have two children here with the same name. And what's going to happen is, as I start entering more information, it's going to pop up an alert that's going to say, wait, this looks like it's the same person, and then you can say, yes, it is, and it will automatically merge them for you. It does the same thing in your Ancestry online tree. So here's the caveat to that, however. You have to add people manually in order to get those alerts. So if you're just merging people from other trees, it's going to assume, the system assumes that the other person has already paid attention to that. But as you merge people into your tree, sometimes you either miss those alerts, or they don't show up because the information isn't exactly correct, or the alert doesn't show up because of the way that you're doing the merge. So one of the rules that I follow is that I just always add people manually to my tree. And there are a few reasons for that. Not just because you get the alerts, but also because you start to get to know these people. I have found in the past that when I've just copied a GEDCOM from someone, or when I've just merged stuff into my tree, and it's been years since I've done that, but when I just merge stuff, I'm not paying attention, and I really don't get to know those people. I have a very large tree because I do a lot of descendancy research, meaning I take a set of ancestors and I trace all of their descendants. And what happens is I get to know those people. So even though my tree is very, very large, you could probably drop me anywhere on this list of names and I could tell you approximately how they're related to me, because I've added these names one at a time, because I've looked up the records and kept the notes and started to understand who these people are. And really, for me, that's what family history is about. It's not about how big I can grow my tree, or it's about coming to know the people who went before me and the stories of their lives. And so what happens is, as I add those names one at a time, I come to know those people. But it also means that the next time I go to add somebody in my tree, there's this little like niggling feeling in my brain that says, this information seems really familiar. And so then it leads me to go say, hey, maybe this person's already in my tree. And so what happens is, when you're in your online tree and you go to add a person, let's just go here to Eliza, for example. When you go to add a person in your online tree, you have the same options there. Rather than just adding them as a new person, you can select someone in your tree. You can view that list and then say, well, I'm adding a person, but really that person is here already in my tree. And so you can select them from the list. You don't have to add them as a new person. Let me just show that to you one more time so that you're clear about how that works. When you go to add a person to your tree, and be sure to view the list so that you can determine if they're already in your tree somewhere or not. Okay, and that same thing works in Family Tree Maker. When I go to add a person to my tree, I have the option instead to attach a person that already exists. And if I'm keeping this index panel open over here, I will know that they're already in my tree. Now, that's just one way. Well, those are some of the ways in which I prevent the duplicates from occurring at all. Now, there will still be duplicates that occur. For example, my mother's grandfather, his wife passed away, and when my grandfather was very young, and he remarried, and then that wife, I think she actually was put into a mental hospital, and then he remarried again, and his third wife ended up being the sister, oh, wait for it, of his daughter-in-law. So I had her first name in the tree, and somehow I hadn't made that connection yet. I knew what her first name was. I wasn't quite sure of her maiden name. Then when I found out what her maiden name was, I thought, wait a second, our Uncle Carl married a woman with that last name, and sure enough, it turned out that these two women were sisters. And so there was some merging that needed to occur, because that's sometimes the process of discovery means you don't know right away that there are duplicate people in your tree. And so there are some ways to merge duplicates. Let's just go over those. One is in Family Tree Maker. You're going to click on Person and then merge two specific individuals. So that's up here. In Family Tree Maker, you're going to click on Person, And then the very bottom option there is merge to specific individuals. And that's then going to ask you if you want to make a backup, and you should be doing that hopefully regularly. And then you can say, okay, well, I'm going to merge, these people. And so you just select from the list, and then it'll allow you to merge. Now, you'll notice here that my OK button is not lit up. That is because it will not allow you to merge two people of different genders. And so you need to pay attention to that. It also will not allow you, of course, to merge the same person into themselves. So in this case, I'm on Dan Jones here in my window. I cannot merge him with himself. However, if I select any one of these others, you'll notice that OK button is now available to me. The system is going to allow you to merge whatever you want, whatever you tell it to do. And so it's up to you to pay attention to what you're merging. Make sure that they really are the same person before you go through that, or you could create some real havoc in your tree. There's intentional pedigree collapse enough without us creating unintentional or inaccurate pedigree collapse. So that's how you do that in Family Tree Maker. In your Ancestry online tree, you also have the ability to merge duplicates. You're going to find that under the More Options button when you're on a person's page, and then there's an option there to merge with duplicate. So if I come over here to Eliza, here under More Options, there is a merge with duplicate. And what it does, and let me just walk you through this briefly here, is on the left-hand side, it shows you all of the information that you have in your tree. And then in the right-hand side, it'll show you a possible match. So I have somebody else in my tree with the name Eliza Jones. She was born in about 1842, so her birth year is not terribly different. I imagine if I was to look more closely at her, she was probably also born in Tennessee. She died in 1884. Now, my Eliza died sometime before 1910. We've found her in the 1900 census. By 1910, her husband is listed as a widow, and so she is not listed. And so we're still looking for her death information. 1884, of course, is before 1910, and so this is proposed to me as a possible duplicate. Now, I know this is not that person, and so I could then just type in the name of anybody else from my tree, and it would bring up a list of people to choose from. Okay? If I don't know how they're entered, or their name might be entered wrong or different, I can also just click View List, and it will show me the complete list of everybody in my tree, and I could select the duplicate person that way, and then click Merge. It is going to merge all of, and there's a note here telling you this, all of the facts, all of the media items, and all of the sources for those two people into one person. What that means is if you've actually done full research on both people in your tree, you're going to end up with probably some duplicate facts or sources or media. And so then you'll need to go to that person's profile and clean it up a little bit so that it is a little bit more concise. I hope that makes sense. So what we're looking for is if you have duplicates in your tree, you can merge them in Family Tree Maker, and you can also merge them in your online tree. Now, if you have your Family Tree Maker synced to your online tree, only do it in one place or the other. Don't do it in both and then try to sync. You'll probably run into some problems. So if you merge somebody in Family Tree Maker, for example, then run a manual sync on your tree so that it syncs with your Ancestry online tree, and then just double check that everything worked okay. If you try to do it in both places, it can cause some problems. So hopefully that made some sense. So this is a topic I think that a lot of us deal with on a regular basis. Again, do your best to prevent the duplicates by just keeping a single tree, watching out for those alerts, doing some manual entries so that you become familiar enough with these people that when their name pops up again in the same county in Indiana or in the same little town in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, that you are familiar enough with them that it at least rings some kind of a bell in your head or an alert in your head. If not, there are some alerts built into the system, both online and in Family Tree Maker. Pay attention to those. And then if you still create duplicates, which will happen, there are ways to merge those duplicates in both Family Tree Maker and in your online tree on Ancestry.com. Hopefully that was helpful. If you have any questions, I will be on the chat on live stream if you're watching this live immediately following the broadcast. If you are watching an archived version of this on YouTube, please feel free to leave a comment and I will answer those as I see them. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.